Everybody. So yesterday in Flipped, I kind of left you hanging a bit. So mean of me. We just found out that there was a family member of Juliana's that had some mental disabilities, and grandfather pointed that out, and mom got all upset, and then grandfather laid it on the line that the relative of Juliana's had these disabilities because when he was born, he had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck twice. This is something that can happen during childbirth where the umbilical cord gets, because that's what attaches the baby to the mama, and that's how nutrition happens. And sometimes through movement, the cord can get wrapped around the baby's neck, and then through childbirth, the baby can strangle to death. And then Grandpa Point reminded them, told Bryce that he also had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck when he was a baby. So I'm going to go back and reread a little bit. She's upset because she knows that she could very well be standing in Mr. Baker's shoes right now. I thought about it for a minute and finally asked, did her brother have the cord around his neck when he was born? He shook his head. Well, then, he leaned even farther forward and whispered, you did. I did. Twice. But the doctor who delivered you was on the ball, plus apparently there was some slack in the cord, so he was able to loop it off as you came out. You didn't hang yourself coming into the world, but it could very easily have gone the other way. If I had been told years or even weeks ago that I'd come down the chute noosed and ready to hang, I'd have made some kind of joke about it. Or more likely, I'd have said, yeah, that's nice. Now, can you spare me the discussion? But after everything that had happened, I was really freaking out. And I couldn't escape the questions tidal waving my brain. Where would I be if things had been different? What would they have done with me? From the way my dad was talking, he wouldn't have had much use for me, that's for sure. He would have stuck me in a nut house somewhere, anywhere, and forgotten about me. But then I thought, no, I'm his kid. He wouldn't do that. Would he? I looked around at everything we had, the big house, the white carpet, the antiques and artwork and stuff that was everywhere. Would they have given up all the stuff to make my life more pleasant? I doubted it. And man, I doubted it big time. I'd have been an embarrassment, something to try to forget about. How things looked had always been a biggie to my parents, especially my dad. Very quietly, my granddad said, you can't dwell on what might have been, Bryce. And then, like he could read my mind, he added, and it's not fair to condemn him for something he hasn't done. I nodded and tried to get a grip, but I wasn't doing a very good job of it. Then he said, by the way, I appreciated your comment before. What? I asked, but my throat was feeling all pinched and swollen. About your grandmother. How did you know that? I shook my head and said, Julie told me. Oh, you spoke with her then? Yeah, actually, I apologized to her. Well, and I was feeling a lot better about everything, but now, gosh, I feel like such a jerk. Don't. You apologized, and that's what matters. He stood up and said, say, I'm in the mood for a walk. Want to join me? Go for a walk? What I wanted to do was go to my room, lock the door, and be left alone. I find it really helps to clear the mind, he said. And that's when I realized that this wasn't just a walk. This was an invitation to do something together. I stood up and said, yeah, let's get out of here. For a guy who's basically only ever said, pass the salt to me, my granddad turned out to be a real talker. We walked our neighborhood and then the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood. And not only did I find out that my granddad knows a lot of stuff, I found out that the guy is funny in a subtle, dry kind of way. It's the stuff he says plus the way he says it. It's really, I don't know, cool. As we were winding back into our own territory, we passed by the house that's going up where the sycamore tree used to be. My granddad stopped, looked up into the night, and said, "It must have been a spectacular view." I looked up too, and noticed for the first time that night that you could see the stars. "Did you ever see her up there?" I asked him. "Your mother pointed her out to me one time as we drove by. It scared me to see her up so high, but after I read the article, I understood why she did it. The tree's gone, but she's still got the spark it gave her. Know what I mean?" Luckily, I didn't have to answer. He just grinned and said, "Let us get dipped in. Some of us get dipped in flat, some in satin, some in gloss." He turned to me. "But every once in a while you find someone who's iridescent. And when you do, nothing will compare." As we walked up to our front porch, my grandfather put his arm around my shoulder and said, "It was nice walking with you, Bryce. I enjoyed myself very much." "Me too," I told him, and we went inside. Right away, we knew we had stepped into a war zone. And even though no one was yelling or crying, from the look on my parents' faces, I could tell there had been a major meltdown while my granddad and I were out. Granddad whispered to me, "I've got another fence to mend, I'm afraid." And he headed into the dining room to talk to my parents. We'll see how this turns out next time. See ya. Thanks for tuning in.